attacks and ransomwares. And unfortunately, as an insurance agent, we never want to tell a client that you're not covered for that. And so, yes, I would say there's a twofold coverages that clients should look into is if I'm having actual data that I have that could compromise an individual itself, you have the legal aspects of how do I actually follow the chain of what I need to do so that I'm not in a lawsuit because this data is breached. And then you also have what they call as technology errors and omissions. So the first one, I can share actually my screen. Let me pull this up here. And this is the one that you can add usually to your normal general liability policy. This is the data compromise and identity restoration coverage. What this technically does is help you with the legal matters around your claim so that we will provide the proper documentation to send to clients when there is a breach that occurs, the forensic review, notifications to individuals affected by the breach, and then services, information material, a toll-free helpline that these individuals can call, credit report monitoring. We've seen that from the Target one a few years back, that these major companies have to provide some credit protection, and also identity restoration case management to help those that were affected, that we can actually restore them back to where they were. So this is an endorsement, and this endorsement is usually, depending on the carrier, is going to run you anywhere from, I'd say, about $100 to $150 a year. So that's the one that would actually help in that situation.
So that's pretty inexpensive, but obviously those are for people that if you're storing private, people's personal information that could get compromised if you were a result of your system was compromised.
Correct. So you basically were able to compromise my system. My client's data was taken, and then from that, what do I do? How do I inform my clients, and what services do we provide for the clients? So this is more for the clients themselves. And then you also have technology. That's the second one. This is for those that have a lot of data. It could compromise their business, and it covers obviously a wide array of different software, data management, packaged software resellers, things like that. This is the one that now it's actually affected them on a liable level, and that business is now coming after me, or that client is coming after me for a liability lawsuit because of their business was shut down, their operations is no longer making the income, employees impacted. So this is the standalone policy. It's kind of like professional liability for like a doctor or a dentist. If something goes wrong, this professional liability would step in to rectify the situation or to satisfy the claim. And what I love this is covers claims allegedly negligent act. It doesn't mean, even if you're not at fault, the legal cost to this, which is mentioned right above here, even when professional is found innocent, the legal cost can be substantial in that case. And that's really what you're doing here is if you feel like I'm not negligent, I need someone to protect me from a legal standpoint. So that's the data compromise, and then the E&O technology insurance rolling.
So, I mean, we see the big companies being targeted, but are we seeing smaller companies having to defend themselves in this way? And what would be the situation if a company was held to ransom and they were being forced to pay that ransom? Would the insurance cover that ransom?
So on the errors in technology, it would cover it. So if I was working with Impress Computers in this situation, and we thought we had all the systems in place, and then next thing we know, my computer has ransomware on it, it would provide coverage for that in that case. It's not protecting Impress on the ransomware, it's protecting me on the ransomware.
Okay. Now, what happens if a company, we're seeing a lot of our customers saying that the insurance company is asking for EDR, Endpoint Detection and Remediation, and EPP, which is Endpoint Protection. Now, what happens if the company checks those boxes and then a ransomware attack, and then they find out that they don't have it? Would the insurance company still pay out, or would they say, no, you actually ticked the boxes incorrectly?
Right. It really depends on the company. I've been at State Farm for 18 years, and our normal procedure is when an error on an application filled out by the client, we will provide legal, we will provide claim services. And if the situation isn't rectified by the next renewal, we would decide to non-renew that policy. There are smaller carriers, and I would recommend it, take a look at your company, check out Texas Department of Insurance Complaint Index, and see, are they within the means what Texas believes is a fair amount of claims for the size of the company it is and the policyholders they have. So I have seen, though, numerous times where, nope, you check the box wrong and we're not covering it from these smaller carriers. So do be careful.
So basically, if you're going for a company that is not that well known and you haven't vetted them out, you may get cheap coverage, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get paid out should something happen. Correct.
There are, unfortunately, in all businesses, there's always that those businesses really just trying to, make money and avoid any type of claims payout in our industry. So it's unfortunate, but it does exist.
Okay. So we've seen a tremendous increase in the number of cybersecurity attacks over the last 12 months. From an insurance point of view, are the insurance companies starting to see more of these claims coming in?
Yeah, so the increase in claims, when I contacted the commercial claims representative, he says we've seen an increase of about 30 to 40% in the last 2 years on ransomware questions alone. He says the smaller companies that have no security systems in place, they think they do and they don't, and they're calling us to see if we provide like loss of income. Do we provide any coverage to unlock the actual computer or to pay the ransomware? And when they only have general liability, unfortunately, the answer is we don't in that case.
Okay, so it sounds like cybersecurity insurance is a pretty low cost thing to add, but it's something that you should have in place, and that's just going to protect you should an event happen.
Yeah, so, and I'm even a lot of the franchisees out there, Roland, they're actually, I've had several of them come to me like, hey, they're giving me a deadline that I need to add this by this date. So it's that's why, again, they need someone like you, Roland. They need to have those 4 measures that we've talked about set in place to protect themselves. It's a real threat to companies and to the company's clients, more importantly. So yeah, I think at one point it will be a standard in our industry.
Okay, yeah. So I think every company should have it. Yeah. Now, what I'm going to do now is go into what can those businesses do to protect yourselves against cybersecurity attacks. So I'm going to go ahead and share this screen, and this is going to show you what we call a cybersecurity stack. And we've developed this over a period of time. And on the front end, when we manage a client, the first thing that we do is that we put in this, what we call endpoint protection. And we have physical technicians sitting there, and they're getting alerts when something is happening, and they're identifying them and responding to it. Now, obviously, the next thing, having an antivirus should always be there. We insist that you have, we now are switching to Sentinel 1 as the antivirus, but you should always have an up-to-date antivirus. Having a firewall in today's environment is also essential. And that firewall should be a known firewall that has a subscription, because it's just like your antivirus. If your firewall definitions are out of date, you're not going to be protected. DNS filtering and multi-factor authentication has now become the new normal for your emails, logging onto your bank. If you log on remotely, everything should have some type of multi-factor authentication. And what that means is that when you go to log on, it's going to send a notification to your cell phone or to an authenticator app on your phone that you can enter that password in. And that's just a secondary measure to make sure that nobody else that shouldn't be logging in is getting access. Email filtering, we use a program called Graphis. And what that does is it uses AI technology to filter people's emails and automatically get rid of anything that has ransomware, malware, or a virus payload that's embedded into that email. And it's going to take that out from the back end so you don't even see it. Phishing training, the number one thing that how companies are getting targeted is through their employees. So having phishing training to get your employees up to speed to know what does a phishing attack look like, and if those employees click on a link or an attachment, then we get those alerts and we say, okay, they need additional training to be on the high alert. And then the next layer of defense that we use is a program called Threat Locker. That's zero trust. And what that does is it's whitelists all the known good programs, and then it locks everything down. So it says nothing else is allowed to run beyond that. So if you go to install a program, you click on a link, click on an attachment, it stops it from running. The next layer of defenses is what we call the EDR, Endpoint Detection and Remediation, from Sentinel 1. And what that does is if something gets past all of these defenses, they're looking for files that are changing. And if something happens out of the ordinary, they can lock it down. And that's on a 24/7 basis. So if it's at 2 o'clock in the morning, it'll still lock that machine down, stop it from spreading. It notifies us, and then we can go in and decide, was this a false positive, or was there something legitimately running in the background? At least we've isolated it. We can go and fix that machine, and the company is not shut down. And of course, the final thing is backup, disaster, and recovery. And that is where, if for some reason something gets past every single defense, we're going to revert to the backups. So as you can see, it's a multi-layered defense. You've got to have all of these things in place to protect yourselves. Now, we may have some people say, well, I've got less than 5 people in my company. I can't afford to have this full multi-layered defense. What are the things that I can do as an individual or a very small business owner to protect myself? Well, the first thing is obviously making sure that you've got an offsite backup. Crashplan Pro or something similar to that is Crashplan Pro is $10 a month, and it's a multi-layered backup, which means that if you were to get compromised, you can at least go back to a previous day and recover from that. And then local backups, if you're using external hard drives as a backup, you can't leave it plugged in, because if your machine gets infected, guess what? It's going to jump across and go onto your external hard drive. So if you use external hard drives, you should be alternating those. We even have 3 hard drives that you just alternate in and out, so that if you do get compromised, your backup gets compromised, you go to the previous day's backup and you can plug that in and recover from that. The next thing that you can do is obviously always make sure your antivirus is up to date. And we recommend Malwarebytes Premium as a good anti-malware. And that prevents a lot of the ransomware from coming in. And the cost in that is pretty minimal. It's about $29 a year. So adding that to your current antivirus is essential. And then obviously keeping your operating system and your programs up to date. So if your operating system is out of date, if your programs are out of date, you run the risk of the bad guys are going to get past the operating system or the program defenses because you haven't done the definition update. All of the companies that are out there, Microsoft, Adobe, Zoom, etc., they all get compromised at some point and they bring out patches. And if you don't have those patches applied, then you're going to be vulnerable. So keep your computer operating system up to date, keep your programs up to date. And when they alert you that there is an update, you've got to get it done. The next thing you can do is obviously user intelligence. Be very wary of any links or attachments that are coming through on emails. That's the number one way that people are getting infected. And a few things, good habit is shut your machine down when you're not using it. Because if your machine's shut down, then the bad guys can't get in. Typically, we're seeing ransomware happen at about 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. If you've left your machine on, you're going to be vulnerable during that time. If it's shut down, then you're going to be protected. And the next little trick that you can do is create 2 users. One would be your admin user, and the second one would be a non-admin user. So you just have a user for general use. That means that you can't install programs when you're running under the non-admin user. But what it does mean is that you're less likely for the bad guys to be able to get in. If you clicked on a link or an attachment by mistake, you don't have admin rights and you're less likely to be compromised. So those things, just to go over them, obviously offsite backup, local backup, keeping your antivirus up to date, have Malwarebytes in addition to a current antivirus. Don't click on links or attachments. Shut your machine down when you're not using it, and create 2 users, one for your general use and one for when you can log on when you need to log on with admin rights to install those programs.
Well, I have a question on the admin user.
Sure.
So if you add the admin user, that admin user gets to pick the rights of certain things that the other individuals can do. Is that something you guys help with?
Yes, so we can help with that. And it's pretty simple. And that's just something that should be ordinary policy throughout your business, so that each individual employee and yourself don't have admin rights when you're using the computer. You've just got to remember, okay, I need to install a program, log in as the admin, yeah, and then you're good to go.
Gotcha. Okay. And then you've actually told me the backups where they go wrong many times is where they have it connected, like you mentioned earlier. So is that pretty often that you see the backup is connected to the computer and that really is not even a backup anymore?
Yeah, every single time a hard drive has been connected to the computer, people have got infected. We even had a CPA firm. They had seven accountants running in their practice. Each accountant had a USB drive that backed up every night. One person got infected, it spread to all 7 of them, and every single hard drive that they had plugged into the computer got infected. Another big mistake we see people make is that they think of Dropbox, OneDrive, Google Drive as a backup. Now, that is what we call a cloud synchronization. So whatever's on your computer is getting synchronized with the cloud. That's great if your hard drive fails or if your computer gets stolen. But of course, if you get hit with ransomware encrypts all the files. Those files are being synchronized with the cloud. And guess what? Whatever's in the cloud is then, it's got your encrypted data.
From a financial loss, and when you see this happen, obviously as a business owner, I'd be a little freaked out, right? That you can't operate. That actually happened to us today. We had a power surge and we were down for about a half hour. And we're going to pull our plan B here in our office. We have plan B in place. But what do you see this, this is obviously much worse than our little power surge we had earlier today. Cost of money to a business. What's the worst case scenario you think you've seen?
So we've seen a number of things. We did have some companies where they came and everything was encrypted. We couldn't recover from backups. They would have been completely shut down. They had to pay the ransom. The cost in that was about $30,000. But by the time they had to get the Bitcoins, they finally got their data up and running. By the time they recovered from it, they had lost about 10 to 14 business days of being able to work. So we got a couple of questions here. Jeff is obviously asking, QuickBooks requires the administrator to use it. And if you're using QuickBooks and it requires you to be an administrator, we've seen some law firms where that legal software requires them to be administrator. There's not much you can do about it. You have to run as administrator, and then you've got to have good backups. Jeff was also asking about, doesn't Acronis with encryption prevent ransomware on your backups? Yes, for our managed service clients, we use Acronis. It does have kind of like an antivirus built into the backup, and it checks your backups for those. Now, Acronis, the great thing about that, we use their cloud and their local version. That if we had a company that got hit with ransomware, they had the Acronis backups running, and we were able to log on to the cloud, restore their server completely. So they had 2 terabytes of data. Within 6 hours, we had the entire server with all their data, with all their programs. Everything was restored within 6 hours, had them up and running. So they minimized their downtime. So that Acronis software is a really good one. It is a lot more expensive. If you obviously can't afford something like Acronis, you can go with Crashplan Pro. Now, Crashplan Pro only does your data. What does that mean for you? If you got hit with ransomware and you had to completely wipe out your server and restore it, it would mean you'd have to reload your operating system, reload all your programs, and then restore your data.
Yeah, 6 hours sounds a lot better than 14 days. Yeah, and the cost of business and $30,000 of ransomware, I could only imagine. So
yeah, so it's with some companies where if you're not able to pay the ransom, and if you don't have correct backups, we're seeing up to 50% of the number of companies that are affected by a major ransomware attack, they end up closing their doors. So this is pretty major. So first of all, try and make sure you don't get affected by ransomware. And if you do, the quicker you respond to it, the better the chances are of recovering from it. So we had one law firm, one person clicked on a link, things started happening, and they couldn't open a file. The next person couldn't open a file. And it was 4 o'clock in the evening, so they thought, well, you know what? Let's just deal with this tomorrow. We're not sure what's going on. They called us the following day and said, we've got an issue. We went in there and everything had been encrypted. All they had to do was say, I'm having an issue, shut the machine down, disconnect it from the network. We could get in there, isolate the problem, and stop it from spreading. So, if you don't have that 24/7 SOC or security operations center that we offer to our managed service clients, the best thing you can do is shut the machine down or disconnect it from the network so it doesn't spread to everybody else. We do have another question. Does Dropbox offer encryption? So if you get hit with ransomware, we've seen the people who did have ransomware and it spread to their Dropbox. Everything in their Dropbox got encrypted. Now, sometimes they have earlier versions that you can go to, but we've seen a number of cases where everything in the entire Dropbox folder was encrypted.
And one item I forgot to mention, we were chatting about the insurance. It's huge in our industry, in all financial and medical industries, is PSI, personal sensitive information. This is something to go, hey, should my company have a all full out plan like what we're talking about? So personal sensitive information is going to cover if you have any dates of births, if you have any type of social securities or partial social security, do you have any type of recurring payments that's stored on your computer, any medical records, anything like that. That's that personal sensitive information that here at State Farm, when we send out and we receive a driver's license, and if we respond back, our system actually shuts down that email and does not allow it to go out, because personal sensitive information is a huge topic of conversation. So if you want to know, hey, am I in this? You're looking for that date of birth, social security number, credit cards, bank accounts, medical records, things like that, that would warrant that, hey, you probably need to reach out to Roland and set something up.
So it's definitely something that every single business should be aware of, and we've seen even individuals get hit with ransomware. So it's not just businesses, but people's personal computers, and people just didn't have a backup. So having that alternating backup, even if it's for your home computer, is a good idea.
Yeah, that's why I wrote it down, actually, Roland, because my wife has had it twice happen to her, and we see it on the homeowners front, and that's why we actually have the same coverage, the data restoration, ransomware coverage. And that's really, I think it's $24 a year on our homeowners. But again, having the backups and going through all that pain, I've seen it happen a couple of times, my wife already, where we get locked out, and we brought up to Roland, and he was able to get open one of them one time, but it's pretty tough. So appreciate it.
Yeah, and I think the big thing is you just got to remember to respond as quickly to it as you can. If you notice something out of the ordinary, don't ignore it. You can take a snapshot of it, contact us, shut your machine down. So I guess at this point, we can open it up to any other questions. If anybody wants to ask Kyle a question or myself a question, we will open it up to any other questions as well. So one of the things that we did see recently was also remote connectivity, and this is a big one. A company, they were fully protected, the server was locked down, the bookkeeper got sick, so they actually said sent the bookkeeper home, and they said, okay, well, here's some login credentials to log on to your business machine. She logged on from her home machine, which was a Windows 7 computer that actually had the ransomware payload on that machine. She logged on to her business machine. The ransomware spread from her home machine to the business machine. That spread to the server, shut the whole company down. So, we're obviously in this post-COVID era, working in either people working from home or a hybrid situation where sometimes they're working from home, sometimes working from the office. It's essential to use a secure method. We recommend LogMeIn to log on. That's pretty secure. But also, employees should have company-issued locked down computers, not their home computers, because if you have a home issued computer that you don't have any access to your security guys, from an IT point of view, you're allowing that bad egg to come in, and you don't have any eyes on it. So it should only be company issued lockdown computers that your employees use, and you've got to use a secure platform like Logmein. Now, Christine, she says, go over the insurance options again. Endorsements added to homeowners or GL, standalone policy. Does that include E&O, or is that separate, Kyle?
Yeah, the E&O coverage is a standalone policy. It's called a surplus or specialty policy. So you won't maybe find a lot of companies writing that policy. The data restoration or the ransomware or identity restoration, actually, what that one actually is basically, as from a business standpoint, we're going to help your clients, help you send the right letter to the clients, informing them, help them monitor their credit, restore their data, their credit and their files, let them know exactly what happened. So that one on the business level is more for the protection of your clients and notifying your clients that this has occurred. On the homeowners, that is something for the homeowners or any residents of the home. So actually, one thing I've learned over the last few years is always use credit cards, avoid using debit cards or checks from a business account. You're only liable for $75 of a claim on a credit card. So if that was an incorrect purchase, or someone duped you in some way or shape or form. But I did have my Chase account, actually, because I do send out checks, and that person just has to take that routing account number, and they start debiting. They debited out about $10,000 in about 3 days out of my account. And luckily, Chase did refund the money, but they actually don't have to from a financial institution when it's from your bank account. FDIC insurance is for when the bank folds, not to protect your money to get it back. So that's a great question. Great question.
So another thing that we did see was a person's bank account obviously got compromised at some point, and the bad guys use Zelle to transfer the money. So do you know of any insurance claim that could actually cover something like that, or is that?
Yeah, actually, there is coverage on, I know State Farm's policy, and that we have a credit card and bank loan forgery and things like that. So there is some coverage, and even on business policies, there's coverage for similar types of instances where there's some forgery. It's a really good question for an adjuster. Unfortunately, I have a producer's license, but yeah, there is coverage there that you can look into, and it's going to be a case-by-case basis that would be covered. And I had a question for you, Roland. So if someone was wanting to go, okay, what's the next step? What do you do for a client when you're figuring out, hey, is it a good fit for you and a good fit for, what they're doing? How does that all get started for you guys?
Well, the first thing is we would normally have what we call an on-site network assessment. And we would just sit down with the business owner, run a network assessment, and we do that at no charge. We would then present that and say, okay, this is what it would cost for us to look after you. And that's also a useful thing to also pinpoint loopholes that you currently have in your network. And then another good thing, and we're going to offer that to everybody that is attending the webinar, is going to be a dark web scan. And the dark web scan is important because it lets you know if your credentials are on the dark web. And if your credentials are found to be on the dark web, at least you can then change. If that is indeed your current credentials, you should change all your passwords straight away. There's not much you can do once it's on the dark web, but at least you know, okay, somewhere along the line, my username and password got exposed. Let me change all my passwords.
Yeah, I actually didn't even know the dark web existed, but now that I have children of age, yeah, they're able to I'm like, what's the dark web? Like, oh, you don't know about it? I'm like, yeah, no. She's like, yeah, it's where all the secret stuff is. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So,
And pretty much everybody in today's environment has got some information out there on the dark web. It could have been compromised. Sometimes these large companies get compromised and they haven't let anybody know, or they might have sent you an email years ago, but your information's out there. So it's a matter of being on top of the situation. And you can even have that alert you in a live form to say, hey, we've just noticed that you've got some information on your company exposed on the dark web, and you can respond to it straight away. Jeff was asking about server security recommendations. Should you shut down a server during the night, or would you unplug the server from the network? You know, that's a little bit of a tricky one. Workstations are designed to be shut down. Your server you could shut down if you're not doing any updates or people don't require any information from your server during that time. So most businesses end up running their server at night, but you know, if you've shut down all the workstation and your server's secure behind a firewall, it's normally going to be reasonably protected. It's only if, because typically the bad guys are not really hitting the server directly. They're coming in through a workstation. From the workstation, then they jump onto the server. So if you do have a server in place, obviously that server should be in a protected environment, and nobody should be running any programs or, you know, doing anything on that server. So it should be reasonably protected. And again, if you unplug it from the network, that's another alternative. Obviously, you wouldn't get any Windows updates if you're trying to run those at night. So Kyle's State Farm, you were saying that they've received about a substantial increase over the last 2 years in claims. Do you know if part of that has also been involved in paying the ransomware?
yes, if they have the the E&O protection, that's going to provide the ransomware protection there. Or if a client of mine, that's a liability, that's where the data compromise would come into play. One thing, just kind of a recommendation for everybody on the call is make sure you're meeting with your agent every year to 2 years. And the reason being is your business has evolved from a startup business to maybe where it's at today. And at some point will be probably passed on to next generation or sold. But I've seen time and time again where, a client has no inventory of any kind and they have $40,000 in inventory listed on their policy. And I've had clients I had one that had $80,000 of inventory and had $1 million liability policy, and he thought that protected him. So one of the services that we do when we meet with the client, kind of do a 10-point check on their policy. We go through your business property. Is there building property? What is medical payment coverage? People see it on their policies. They're not too sure what that is. Workers' comp, is that something that's concerning? I mean, there's so many little intricate things that you need to kind of modify for your particular business. So, and then Jeff, did you have a question? I saw your hand raised, or was that the question we answered earlier?
Well, I think Roland just answered it about the server.
Okay.
And also, just to comment, what he was stating of how somebody got their ransomware attack on their server from somebody logging in it from a home network, that actually happened to me. Oh. And so I know it's very capable of happening, but did Roland's recommendation about Acronis, my backups were all encrypted. And I found that they really could not encrypt or re-encrypt encrypted files. They changed the extension name of the file. And once you restored the extension back to the right extension, the data was there. So that was an interesting thing to learn.
Great.
Yeah, Acronis is essential, and it's just sticking to the simple things, making sure that employees have got lockdown machines. They don't use their home computers. I know we went through a phase at one point where it was this bring your own device to work, or work from home and use your home computer. And it's just not a safe thing to do anymore. You've really got to get away from that situation, issue them with a computer or a laptop, and make sure it's locked down, and that it's not used for anything else apart from purely logging into your work computer to do your work.
I don't know if you can still hear me. I just was looking at everybody in the room with you, Roland, and it wasn't until about a minute ago I realized that was your wallpaper background. I've never seen everybody there so quiet, and then I realized you were in the background as well.
Well, I've learned to clone myself, so.
He has really good employees too. They're
yeah, they're just sitting there quietly paying attention.
They don't move.
Well, my hat's off to you for putting this webinar on, and I value the service that you provide to me and sure to many other clients. I appreciate you doing it. Great.
Thanks, Jeff. And yeah, so a couple of things. If you're interested, Kyle will offer that 10-point analysis of your insurance. Make sure that, one, do you have adequate coverage? And two, are you not overpaying for insurance for things that you don't need? So you really want to look at both sides of your insurance. And then from our point of view, we're going to offer you a dark web scan, and we're also going to offer you a network assessment. And that network assessment, it'll give you about 50 different points on your network to make sure, am I adequately protected? Am I covered for everything? And obviously the dark web scans is just going to make sure if your information's out there, at least you know you have been compromised, and get all those passwords changed. So Kyle, it's been great chatting. I'm glad you could.
Thank you for inviting me again. I love doing these. And yes, if anybody needs anything, I'm actually going to go ahead and post. This is the contact information for Encryption Computers. So if you want to reach out to them, and then I'll post mine here in a second. And yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us at any time, and we are always here to help.
All right. So if we don't have any other questions, I'd like to thank everybody who joined us today, and we'll have another one of these soon.
Yeah,
great.
Definitely, Roland. Have a great day.
All righty. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody, for attending.